Hi there, everybody. This is Lee, and I'm talking about women in politics or women interacting with politics, speaking on politics, stuff like that. I find that on this channel, McQueen Press, that the most pushback I get is not on racial issues or even Democrat versus Republican or conservative versus liberal issues. The most pushback I get is on women's issues. And it's interesting. That's all I can say. That it's really interesting that there's just a lot of resistance, we'll say. And I find that interesting. It's just what it is. But for people who are puzzled about why women are in the streets, this might be one of the reasons why. That they're in the streets because they don't have a seat in the White House. They've got 20% of the seats in the Senate, maybe 19% of the seats in the U.S. House, 24% of the seats in the statewide positions. And so, that's not sufficient representation for women who make up 51% of the population. So those who are inside are inside, but those who are outside the halls of power, they go to the streets. But anyway, there's historical precedent for this. The fact that there's been efforts to silence women speaking out on issues of the struggles that they've encountered in this arena, maybe the workplace arena, the military arena, political arena, every arena, just society, culture, economic arena, all spectrum, all across the spectrum. And so I went to the past. Usually I do, just to see like what happened way back then. And I purposely did my Black Girl Magic series because I think history gets forgotten and then sometimes misinterpreted or whitewashed until people kind of forget like these issues have been going on for a while now. They're not new. It's been ongoing. And so I find that there is an effort to silence women on speaking out about women's issues, gender, feminist, etc., reproductive issues. Also, sometimes even race and sex issues or race and gender issues. And this attempt to silence is, to encourage women not to rock the boat. And there's a subtle threat like, well, if you keep speaking up about this, then things might get worse. Now, if you speak up about this, then Trump will get elected again. If you speak about these issues, then the Republicans will, and so it's an attempt to silence. And that's not new either. It's historical, this attempt to silence women from speaking out. And I use Fannie Lou Hamer as an example. I've spoken about her in my Black Girl Magic series because she was a fantastic woman who endured a lot of struggle. She persisted through many horrific experiences in Mississippi to achieve quite a lot in terms of voting rights activism in that state. She did not hold, well, she did hold a political office like within the Democratic Party, but not like statewide or municipal or national office. But I will be speaking about Shirley Chisholm as well, who was in the House and ran for president. So anyway, Fannie Lou Hamer, she helped to found the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. She founded that party because the main Democratic Party was segregated. So the Freedom Party was inclusive of African Americans, and that's what Fannie Lou Hamer established. And so, she was involved with voting rights, anti-civil, working against anti-civil rights legislation, things like that. And so, she actually attended the Democratic National Convention in 1964, in order to be seated and to speak about her efforts at voting rights in the state of Mississippi. I mean, she'd been arrested, she'd been jailed, and then beaten down with a blackjack, and denied medical care, and so then became physically disabled as a result of the treatment that she experienced while she was involved with the effort for voting rights. And so she went with her delegation of Freedom Democratic Party delegates to the convention, and there was a refusal to seat them. And there's a delicate situation, a part of the larger picture, whereby Lyndon B. Johnson was seeking the Democratic Party's nomination for re-election, and that he was, likely going to be up against the Republican challenger, Barry Goldwater, Hillary Clinton's mentor, I guess. And so, the segregationists. And so, if there were a problem, that, it was possible that LBJ would lose the support he needed from Mississippi. And so, Fannie Lou Hamer came and testified about what was happening, the violence being done to African Americans trying to exercise their rights to vote, to achieve equality, and to be treated, as humans in Mississippi. And this enraged LBJ, Lyndon B. Johnson, because her speaking out, he considered that damaging to his efforts to get the Democratic Party nomination. It was inconvenient for him, and that he referred to her as that illiterate woman. And so she went ahead and testified to address the convention's credentials committee. And she said, all of this is an account we want to register to become first-class citizens. And if the Freedom Democratic Party is not seated now, I question America. Is this America the land of the free and the home of the brave, where we have to sleep with our telephones off the hook because our lives are threatened daily because we want to live as decent human beings in America? And so Lyndon B. Johnson called an emergency press conference in order to divert the cameras away from Fannie Lou Hamer's testimony of the problems that she encountered in Mississippi in her efforts to be seated. So he made an effort to divert the cameras by calling a press conference at the same time, just to make a kind of a off, out of left field announcement, recognizing something really unrelated to the topic at hand. And so he was successfully swung the cameras away from Fannie Lou Hamer, but then they ran her speech later that night on the evening news. And so Johnson tried to negotiate with Fannie Lou Hamer while she was still trying to be seated. He sent Hubert Humphrey. He was campaigning for the vice presidential nomination, and tried to compromise with Fannie Lou Hamer. She wanted all of her delegates seated, and they were trying to just say, well, 2 can sit, but they can't vote. And so she was not having that. And so Hubert Humphrey just kind of, outlined that compromise to her and told her, Fannie Lou Hamer, that his position on the ticket as vice president was at stake, due to her cooperation or lack of cooperation. And so Fannie Lou Hamer was, being pressured to play ball, to just cooperate. But she stood her ground. She stuck to her guns, and she said, "Do you mean to tell me that your position is more important than 400,000 Black people's lives?" Senator Humphrey, I know lots of people in Mississippi who have lost their jobs trying to register to vote. I had to leave the plantation where I worked in Sunflower County, Mississippi. Now, if you lose this job as vice president because you do what is right, because you help the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, everything will be all right. God will take care of you. But if you take the nomination this way, while you'll never be able to do any good for civil rights, for poor people, for peace, or for any of those things you talk about, Senator Humphrey, I'm going to pray to Jesus for you. Okay, and so after that, they left her out of the negotiations. But it just goes to show that there were different priorities. Johnson and Humphrey were concerned about their jobs, and how Fannie Lou Hamer, speaking of her concern about her life and the life of, people of African American descent in Mississippi, she was speaking of her concerns about their very lives. And so that's the different take that people had on that issue. Let me get something to drink. And so they conducted the negotiations without Hamer. And they just came up with the same compromise that two of the delegates would be seated from Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, and they won't be able to vote. And so she rejected that offer. She stuck to her guns all the way through. And she said, "We didn't come all the way up here to compromise for no more than we'd gotten here. We didn't come all this way for 2 seats when all of us are tired." And so basically, she said that all of them would be seated or none would be. But in 1968, 4 years later, the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party was seated. And in 1972, Fannie Lou Hamer was elected as National Party delegate. And so that time, when she went to the Democratic National Convention, Shirely Chisholm was one of the candidates. And I think 12 of the Mississippi delegates voted for Shirley Chisholm. And I don't know for sure, but I'm really hoping that one of them was Fannie Lou Hamer. But again, this effort to silence, rights based on race, examples of racism being silenced in order to protect the status quo. And so now we have Shirley Chisholm. She was one of the first women to run on the Democratic Party ticket. It was not Hillary Clinton who was the first woman to run on the Democratic Party ticket. Shirley Chisholm was the first woman to do that. Hillary Clinton was the first to be nominated. So Shirley Chisholm went through the primaries. She did not make it out of the primaries, but she was the first one to run on the Democratic Party ticket. And so Shirley Chisholm was very much involved not only in racial issues, but also women's issues. Let's see. In fact, the people that Shirley Chisholm hired for her office were all women. She hired an all-female staff. Half of the staff were Black. And Shirley Chisholm said that she did that because she faced much more discrimination during her New York legislative career because she was a woman than because of her race. And so, even while she ran in the presidential primaries, she was ignored by much of the Democratic political establishment. And she says that she received little support from her Black male colleagues. And so she says that when I ran for the Congress, when I ran for president, I met more discrimination as a woman than for being black. Men are men. In particular, she expressed frustration about the black matriarch thing, saying, they think I am trying to take power away from them. The black man must step forward, but that doesn't mean the black woman must step back. But her husband was supportive of her. And so I find that interesting that for her career in the House, that it was sexism that was a higher hill to climb than racism. And so, I find that to be the case still, that most of the pushback that I discover uh, while speaking on public affairs is actually on female, gender, women's issues. That is a particular trigger for some men. Not all men, because not all men are the same. That some men can discuss these issues and, maintain composure. And then there are some men that actually completely lose it and just seem to think, I don't know, something happens up here. And so, I think what it is, for those that feel some type of way about women's issues, that perhaps there's a type of defensiveness that stems from something. There's no way of knowing what that is, but it's like something internal that people have to look inside and see what the barriers are. The barriers are there; they can be overcome, but it's a lot easier if everyone's kind of just recognizing that we're a better society when women are treated well. And hopefully more people will realize that soon. But until that time, women will be in the streets. They will be in the house, in the workplace, in the wherever their space is allowed to speak their truth. And hopefully someone will be listening. Good luck.